Have you ever felt like you're the only one with the right opinion while everyone else just doesn't get it? Or maybe you've scrolled through social media seeing people with lavish lifestyles where their egos seem too big to fit in the camera frame. These aren't just random moments, they are reflections of excessive pride and vanity at play. Welcome to a new episode of Life's Multiverse. Stay tuned as we dive into the world of personal perception, understanding the difference between healthy and unhealthy pride, recognizing it in ourselves and others, and learning how to navigate its tricky waters in our everyday life. I must confess, I have fallen for this trait for a significant part of my life, often unknowingly. For a big part of my life, I was constantly trying to prove that I was better than others, always striving to stay ahead. It was an endless chase, until a moment of self awareness hit me. Throughout my healing journey, I realized what I was experiencing was unhealthy pride. Let's understand the fine line between healthy and unhealthy pride in this journey of understanding personal perception. It's very important because it defines how we see ourselves and how we interact with others around us. It's also helpful to understand how others interact with us. So before we dive in, let's start with the basics. Evolution and psychology. As always, I'm very big on science and I like to look at everything from a scientific lens, kind of. So, from this perspective, pride is defined as the satisfaction that we feel in ourselves or our achievements. It's the confidence in our abilities reflected in high self esteem. And this sounds so far very positive, right? It's something indeed considered valuable to have and positive. Pride was favored because it signals competence and skill, enhancing our survival chances and attractiveness as mates. Pride is also important from psychological point of view because it activates the reward systems in our brain. So when we take pride in something we achieved, our brains release dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter for motivation. So it motivates us to do more and achieve more in the future, which is very helpful on the personal and social level. However, pride is a double-edged sword. There's a thin line where it can morph into vanity. In today's demanding world, where life is increasingly competitive, the pressure to prove our worth can be overwhelming. We get accustomed to showing off, to stand out in the crowd. The urge has intensified with our expanding social reach. Through the internet and social media, unlike the old days, where we used to live in small tribes. And I think we discussed in previous episode about the Dunbar's number. If you remember this 150 individuals, that is the perfect number of people around us to form meaningful connections with. So when we used to live in small tribes of approximately 100 to 150 people, that was not a big deal to stand out and prove our skills because at the end of the day, each of us is unique and we all have unique skill sets and we can prove ourselves. So we can stand out and be productive and attractive at the same time. But nowadays, our social reach expanded to millions through the internet and social media. We are daily exposed to hundreds, if not thousands, of people on all these platforms. And the way to stand out is far reached and very tough. Therefore, the competition is endless, and every day someone is trying to prove they are better at something, sparking a chain reaction of vanity, or this is how I like to call it, because it exactly feels like the chain nuclear reaction. It just expands without limits. Everyone needs to be better. You need to eat better to your body to look better. Even if we need to fake it by filters and multiple layers of edit on our photos just to stand out and prove that we are better. And this is exactly the unhealthy pride that we are talking about. And this is actually a facet of our ego, where individuals may appear self absorbed. Take, for example, someone buying a fancy dress or a super expensive watch just to signal a higher status. Unfortunately, these behaviors often originate as a defensive mechanism. Our brains deploy these tactics to mask insecurities inside of us, to convince ourselves of our worthiness, and to cover up perceived weaknesses. Those who fall into this trap often believe that acquiring such items will dramatically shift how the world perceives them, expecting newfound respect and admiration. Yet the reality is often a brief shower of compliments, followed by a return to normal, where people just treat them as they were doing before, no matter how expensive the dress is or what your watch you're wearing. And this reaction leads to disappointment. However, we just remember that we received a lot of compliments at first, even if it was not a lot, but few compliments are enough to trigger these dopamine centers in our brains that we talked about briefly. And this will make us crave more and more. It creates a craving circuit in our brain, which is a cycle, which triggers the pursuit of material possession in search of satisfaction. Yet, we will never achieve that because every time we buy something new, we will receive just a new brief shot of admiration and compliments. After that, it will fade and vanish, and things will get back to normal, and we need a new spike. So, therefore, it's endless. Each purchase becomes a repeat of the same pattern, an attempt to fill a void that material things alone cannot satiate. This is the vanity loop, or so I like to call it. It's the constant ask for validation, where true contentment remains elusive. And as we dive deep in this topic, we will explore how to break free from this cycle. But before that, I wanted to highlight other ways we see this pattern in our lives, where it's also prevalent in what I call pride of opinion. This is when someone becomes so convinced of their righteousness, and they outright dismiss any opposing viewpoints. This behavior is so widespread in our daily lives. It even makes me questioning if it's really a part of human nature, maybe, because we see it ubiquitously everywhere around us. People think they are right, even in trivial things like food choices or diets, where someone might think that their diet is the right diet and I am eating correctly and you're all eating wrong. And the pernicious part here is that this behavior leads us to grouping people into us versus them groups. So those who share our views are seen as right, pure, and good, while anyone with a different opinion is labeled as wrong or bad. And this doesn't stop here. It extends to more significant and complex issues like political beliefs and political correctness. We see it in heated debates where each side is convinced that their own perspective is the only right way to do things, often unwillingly to consider the alternative viewpoints. And this pride of opinion doesn't only color our view to the world, but also fuels division and conflict. And when someone tries to challenge our beliefs or ideas, our brains automatically takes the defensive position and seeing them as offenders or attacking. So therefore, as a reaction, we get more and more attached to our ideas and beliefs and try to think of ways to debunk their own perspectives. And we might even get aggressive about that. So we can see how unhealthy pride could lead to things spiraling out of control. And it might lead to literal disasters where many wars throughout history started because of that. So it's not only a personal problem, it's a social and very widespread problem. But now we will focus on the personal part and we will tell exactly how you can break free from these cycles. And here there are too many resources and too many ways that will help us. But the one that convinced me the most was inspired by the amazing book that I mentioned in an earlier episode, which is Letting Go by Dr. Hawkins, where he describes how someone could relinquish this unhealthy pride by applying the mechanism of letting go, where Dr. Hawkins suggests that by releasing our sense of possession, we can simply break free from this pattern. And I find this concept to be brilliant, because what he suggests, instead of thinking of our opinions and possessions as something ours, which gives it a personal touch, and we start thinking that this opinion is a part of us. Rather, we need to think of the opinion as just an opinion without attaching it to ourselves. Or simply to any other material possession, we need to think of it as just a watch or a dress, that it happened to be ours just to make use of it and then throw it away, for example, or leave it on the side or whatever. And by this way, when the opinion is true or false, it doesn't matter because it's just an opinion and we can drop it without this sense of attachment. And it doesn't define our personality. Also, with material possessions, here it doesn't encapsulate who we are as individuals. And by adapting this perspective, we begin to untangle our sense of self from our opinions and possessions. This shift doesn't diminish their value or importance in our life. Rather, it frees us from the pressure and vanity of having them represent our worth or identity. It's a liberating process, one that brings us closer to authentic self-awareness and genuine self-esteem. Because here, even if we lose this item, we will not be hurt as much because we don't feel like we lost a part of our personality. And following this practice, we can simply transition from the unhealthy pride to the healthy pride. And healthy pride often goes hand in hand with genuine humility. It's a state where even after achieving something exceptional, a person doesn't feel superior to others. Instead, they experience a kind of pro-social pride, which is the healthy pride we're talking about. It strengthens the social bonds rather than fraying them. Such individuals see themselves as contributors to the community, supporting those around them rather than competing against them. So here we find the importance of humility in this whole mechanism, where it shifts our personal perception to be more friendly with people and pro-social. However, it's very important to be aware that there's something called false humility. This is where some individuals, under the guise of modesty, are actually seeking attention and validation. It's when people kind of fake humility to seek validation deep inside of them, and they are still driven by the need of recognition. And we often see this in politics and other public domains where people exhibit some sort of humility to gain popularity. Unfortunately, this is too a form of vanity. True humility is different. It's not about diminishing your achievement of yourself. It's about recognizing your strengths and success without letting them inflate your ego. True humility allows for healthy pride, the kind that acknowledges your achievements while keeping you grounded and connected to others. This balance is what makes pride healthy and socially constructive. Where, on the other hand, the unhealthy pride, as we discussed, it often serves as an ego mechanism to mask our insecurities and weaknesses. This form of pride can also lead us to take credit in things we don't have control over, such as physical appearance or height or even intelligence. For instance, a person might not have control over their height, as it's determined by genetics. Yet they could develop a sense of superiority simply for being taller, and they see themselves as better than the others. And this is a classic example of what I call ego noise. It's when the ego inflates our sense of worth based on such arbitrary comparisons. But this can quickly become dangerous when individuals start deriving their identity from simplistic and abstract categories like race, ethnicity, or nationality. It paves the way for deep-seated mistrust and prejudice against the others. On the other hand, the healthy pride is usually not egocentric. It even doesn't have to be something personal. We can be proud of accomplishments of family members, friends, or even individuals we never met. Healthy pride allows us to respect and appreciate the efforts and achievements of others. This type of pride fosters a sense of community and connection rather than isolation and competition. It's about acknowledging and being joyful for the collective achievement and progress of those around us, as well as our own. But unfortunately, the way to transform from the unhealthy pride to the healthy pride is not as simple and easy. It's a very tough road. And I myself, as I mentioned, I realized that I was having this unhealthy pride. I can't say that I completely relinquished and transitioned to the healthy pride because it's a really long way. But the most important is that we progress in this one step at a time. And here I can explain briefly why is it so hard to do so. There are multiple factors. As we mentioned, unhealthy pride is often a defensive mechanism that protects our ego. So when we drop this unhealthy pride, the first thing we need to deal with is our insecurities and vulnerabilities, which is not something very pleasant to do. Therefore, our brains rush into pulling us back to this state of unhealthy pride. And other barriers could be cultural and social influences, where sometimes our surrounding circle emphasizes this sense of unhealthy pride inside of us, especially when it's something, as we mentioned, on the social level, such as an idea, social, like political idea, or something depending on the race or ethnicity. Something else is the habitual thinking pattern, where most of us have these ideas ingrained as habitual way of thinking. So breaking these habits is not an easy task to do, and it often comes with very big challenges. But fortunately, even though it's hard to do so, it's not impossible. And here I wanted to mention additional ways that help us identifying these patterns inside of us and changing them. Some would be developing self-awareness for sure, and this could be done in many ways. And here I especially recommend seeking professional help if you can do so, because usually things like therapy or support groups are a very nice way to do so. Also, seeking feedback from people around us and getting constructive criticism is often a very valid and effective ways to identify some behaviors inside of us that we are oblivious to. And another very beneficial way is practicing mindfulness and meditation, because with mindfulness, we are simply aware of our thoughts. We are monitoring constantly our thoughts. So we can see where these thoughts come and we can effectively deal with them. And there are definitely other ways to do so, such as cultivating empathy, compassion, and practicing gratitude. And if you want to learn more about that, you can also check our previous episode about gratitude. It's a very helpful resource, especially for this transition. And here, as we come up to the end of our episode, I hope that our exploration into the realms of pride and vanity has offered you new perspectives. Remember that the shift from unhealthy to healthy pride is a path of continuous growth and self-discovery. It's about balancing our achievements with humility, recognizing our strengths while valuing the contribution of others. And by that, I want to end our episode for now. So see you in the next one.